Representative Greiling, are you
ready? Anytime.
Okay, great. So far we have Representative Mindy Greiling with us. The speaker is just a couple minutes away. And this is Catherine Thompson. We have Tim Nelson here in the room with us. Also on the line is Doug Groh. Andy Kiljohn from Forum Communications, Eric Black from MinPost, Bill Salisbury, Pioneer Press, Brian Bax, AP, Tim Pugmeyer, NPR, Norm Draper, Pioneer Press, Eric Escobar.
Star Tribune.
Oh my gosh, that is such an egregious error. Eric Escobar, WCCO, Randy Kennedy, Minnesota Christian Broadcasters, Mike McEntee, the Uptake, and Paul Damco, Capitol Report. Representative Greiling, would you like to start with maybe comments?
Yes. Well, this is Mindy Greiling, and today we finally have the education bill up on the House floor. And this is a bill that we would not be proud of most years, but in a year of such financial struggle, it is a really good bill. We stabilize education by not cutting it any further. We make sure that there is no more forced borrowing by the state for cash flow, and we repeal the law that allows that to happen. We throw schools a lifeline. While we're not doing our job at the state level for funding our students, we allow the school boards to renew levies without going to the voters. And the voters can have a reverse levy referendum opportunity. This will sunset when we finally do get back in our school.
You're welcome. Hi, did someone just join us? Hello? Okay, sorry, Representative Greiling, but I can hear some other noise.
Okay, so we're stabilizing funding, stopping the forced loans from schools to the state. We are letting school districts save themselves by renewing levies that would otherwise expire until we can fund schools again. And then that would sunset, and we start on the new Minnesota Miracle, which is education reform funding, and properly and equitably funds our schools for students all around the state. This can be phased in. Obviously will take some time, because it will take some time to rate our financial outlook in Minnesota. And that is basically the bill. We do have a lot of things in this bill that will save money for schools, as long as, again, we can't do much here. We are making it easier for them to bill the federal government for special ed costs, draw down money that they're currently not getting. We've reformed in a very extreme way the health and safety levy, which will save school districts thousands of dollars, because they can access without so much bureaucracy their levies for health and safety in our schools. And we also have an analyst for permanent school trust land that will make sure the DNR isn't skimming school dollars off while they manage their lands. And those are the basic things of the bill. There are some policy things in here that are, I think, very good for students, and then there is this controversial Teach for America provision that was stripped out in Ways and Means and is sure to come up on the floor today.
Thank
you.
And
with that, there are questions.
Yeah, and I think since there are so many of you, how do you guys want me to do this? Do you want to go one by one as you enter the line, or do you want to just jump in?
I think we can jump in, Kathy.
That's great. Okay, then go ahead.
Kathy, Representative Greiling, this is Doug Groh. What sort of, is there anything that resembles bipartisan support on this?
No, there's not, because the Republicans all voted against it coming out of education finance, and I'm sure they will again on the floor, except for Representative Garofalo, who's looking to be on the conference committee. But unfortunately, the Republicans are not enamored with some of the lifelines that we're throwing school districts, like repealing the governor's ability to take money from the schools for the state's cash flow, the idea that school districts could renew levies, and the idea that we actually would fund our schools in the future and put that into our plans and our statutes. I think those things are things that the Republicans aren't willing to do. It's the usual talk the talk but don't walk the walk. They do want to prioritize schools, but when it comes to paying for it, we don't seem to get bipartisan cooperation.
Mindy, Norm Draper from the Star Tribune. And could you tell us what the major differences are between the House and Senate education bills? The Senate bill already passed, right?
Well, the Senate bill is bottled up in the rules unless it came out yesterday. Just like ours was temporarily halted in Ways and Means. They are apparently, wanting to get the budget bill out, which they did yesterday on the floor, and now they have some concerns in their caucus, from what I've heard, on some of the race to the top provisions. They have a lot more in there. I don't support a lot of their provisions, so that's one of the differences. Quite frankly, I don't ever try to speak for the Senate. I think we have a lot of agreement on the major parts of the financial parts of the bill. I've talked with Senator Stump. We think we could get that part done in 20 minutes. It'll be the policy things as usual that take discussion.
How about the codifying the funding shifts? They don't have that, do they?
Well, they finally did agree to that, Norm, in the bill yesterday. So I think that they finally, due to the court ruling, come around to seeing that there's no way we can solve this kind of a budget deficit without paying the schools late and doing the accounting gimmick of the property tax recognition shift. So they, with heavy hearts, are coming around to agreeing with us on that, but they don't have it in their education bill at this point.
What's does this add to the financial woes of this session at this point? Is there a cost factor with this?
There's no cost to this bill at all. There's no levy increases. The whole levy tracking sheet is 2 pages of zeros. And we don't put any money at all, new money into the schools. And there is a cut to the Department of Education in this bill. And the governor recommended that. We saw him and raised him a little bit. But other than that, as I said, this would be a bill we wouldn't be proud of in most times. But in this day and age when everything else is being cut to rack and ruin, this does represent a huge prioritization of our students.
Mindy, how big is the cut to Department of Education? And it sounds like there are no other basic education cuts in the bill.
No other cuts in the bill, and it's about $1 million in the first year, and then it grows a little bit in the biennium. It's not a lot, but they have been cut year after year after year. So we don't like it, but always it's easier to cut the department than the students.
What's the status of the other recommendations from the governor on education reform? Are those included in this bill?
The big one that the governor wants, 2 of them, are evaluation of teachers, and we do have annual evaluation of teachers and principals in this bill that came out of the policy committee. The governor wants a Teach for America alternative licensure bill. That's in here as well, and that's going to probably be the bulk of the discussion on the floor today. I'm sorry to anticipate that, because to me this is such a good bill. We should be talking about stabilizing the funding, the lifelines we're throwing to school districts, and the planning for the future when we can equitably and properly fund our schools again. That's my theme song. But there are those who would like to only discuss the 42 teachers that we have in Minnesota in Teach for America out of the legions of teachers and make a big deal out of that. My granddaughter had a Teach for America teacher in Washington, D.C. last year. I don't see what the big deal out of Teach for America is. It's a small program. They go to shortage areas. They're well-qualified, more well-qualified than many of the teachers coming out of the traditional route. They're tracked and mentored for a couple of years. The ones in Minnesota are getting their master's degree at Hamline University, and they continue to work with Hamline for the next 2 years. They have extreme evaluation they have to do as well or better than other teachers, or they're over and out. I don't think that is so threatening, but to many it's seen as a foot in the door. So it's being fought mightily.
Is this enough for the governor, these his so-called reforms?
nothing is ever enough for the governor, but I do believe that we have the makings in here, coupled with other things going on in our state, like the reform of higher ed with the Bush Foundation grant, that should enable us to be in contention for the race to the top. So I'm hoping that the governor will see it that way, because, you know, like, he likes to do things unilaterally. He can unilaterally stomp out our race to the top application, and I think that would be unnecessary. We don't have all the things he wants by far. He shouldn't ever get all the things he wants, but we have enough in here for a very hearty and robust application if we manage to come to agreement with the Senate and the House, and he can sign our bills. If he vetoes them, then of course he has vetoed race to the top as well.
But we've passed the deadline that Alice Segrin said you have to meet to be able to apply for it.
Nah, she blew through the deadline and gave us an extension yesterday. She's been a legislator. She knows that the deadline is May 17th, the day of adjournment, and I think she was trying to rush us along and play tough. But, you know, Alice is such a slight, smiley lady compared to some of us legislators that I think that deadline never meant a thing. And we are on to the real deadline. It's May 17th, and then it's June 1st for when the governor chooses to help us out with that money for the students, or if he just decides to say, I didn't get everything I want, and so I shan't apply. I hope he doesn't do that, because, you know, we are proud of the bill we have here, but it doesn't provide any new funding, and we sure would like the federal funding, and I think we could get it if he would cooperate.
So she actually extended that deadline yesterday. Did she give you a new date?
She actually hasn't talked to me. I read about it, Norm, in the newspaper. But we have never thought she was going to be able to hold to that deadline, because the legislature is the legislature.
Has the governor indicated at all, if you don't have Republican support in the House, Representative Greiling, has the governor indicated that he will sign this bill?
I'm sure he wouldn't sign the House bill as we have it right now, because, as I said, he would not support the new Minnesota Miracle. And the idea that we would ever fund our schools again in a reformed way is not the walk that he's willing to do. So I'm sure we will not be able to have that in the bill that is presented to him, much as we would like a plan. So when we do get back to funding our schools in any amount, we could do it in a reformed way. But he also, I'm sure, will want to take cash flow from the schools again, so that's probably going to have to be compromised. I would like to repeal it and put a stop to it right away, because I don't think the schools need any more takings from Governor Pawlenty, but I am certain that he wants to do it again in September. So that's a bone of contention with Republicans. Again, they prioritize education. They don't want to have an imbalanced budget, but watch what they do, not what they say. I also suspect that despite the fact that we cannot provide anything for schools, that the ability for schools to renew levies without going to the voters, even though there's a reverse referendum and a sunset, as soon as we start funding our schools again, I bet you he won't like that either. So we'll have to talk with him when we get to conference and see what we can come out with, and if he really wants to do a thing for our students. And if those are the things he's objecting to, I kind of think the answer is no, but I never want to give up until we've tried a lot harder.
Mindy,
This is Catherine again. A couple of other people have joined us. Could you tell us who has just beeped in a little late on the conference call? Any reporters? Okay. Joining us now is Speaker of the House, Margaret Anderson Kelliher, and of course, Representative Greiling is still here, so any other questions? Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Speaker Kelliher, do you have a statement or something you'd like to start with?
Well, I was listening to the end here of what Mindy was saying. I think Chair Greiling has laid it out well. I actually would disagree with one thing. I'm not exactly sure that Republicans ever want to balance a budget around here after we've seen their actions of the last week. I mean, first of all, they won't vote for the governor's plan. Then they won't vote for a plan that meets the governor more than halfway and does have some revenue in it. And they seem to be real short on ideas of how to close that gap and make sure that the governor's borrowing from school districts is paid back. And so it's an interesting situation here that that they do not seem to be really at all committed to any level of fiscal responsibility, the governor nor the Republicans in the Minnesota House, at least.
You, Speaker, this is Doug Groh. After last night's vote and the governor's promise of a veto today, what's Plan B?
Well, we certainly are looking for if maybe there are those Republicans who have some ideas about what to do. They certainly are in a place where they have a very strong hand right now. If they came forward and said, we're interested in some form of revenue, we would probably be interested in talking with them. So it actually gives a lot of strength to individual members of the House on the Republican side right at the moment. I think that the governor right now has not fully engaged back with us, so we're looking forward to that. And that's where we go from here. We have obviously, we'll have a vetoed bill, it looks like by the end of the day, that will be at least one option available later on, but I suspect there'll be some other options that will be developed.
And Madam Speaker, Pat Kessler at CCO, I missed that last part. Do you intend to try to override?
Pat, I think that what we need to see is what happens today. If the governor's not serious and if people know the level of financial crisis, we're at least going to take a look at whether that's a possibility or not. I don't know where the wind is coming from on the microphone, but somebody must be either breathing very deeply into the microphone right now or something. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to let your imaginations go wild on that.
We're old and it's early, Speaker.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that last night we heard a lot of rhetoric on the House floor about who pays the fourth tier of the income tax. I think it's very important for Minnesotans to know that under 6% of the filers are filers who have a return with a business S corp, partnership, sole proprietorship, or farm income. We heard some really wildly inaccurate things on the House floor last night, ranging from 40 to 60%, and that is just not the case.
Representative Kelliher, this is Mike McEntee from the Uptake.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. Say, a question here. The Republicans yesterday were claiming that the governor's plan was not really what was represented in what was voted on in the budget cuts. Do you care to comment on that?
The governor's plan was very well represented, and it, especially in the areas of the school borrowing, it was identical. And the only place I think that it wasn't identical in the on-allotment area were some different choices in Health and Human Services, which is, of course, one of the reasons the lawsuit was actually filed, was the governor's continued bashing of people with disabilities and people in deep need in this state. And so we decided that in putting that bill together, there needed to be some relief on Health and Human Services. Everyone, we have cut now almost $3 billion out of this budget in the last 2 years. And I think that the idea that people are not being harmed by those cuts is just really not even believable at this point. And so we did make some different choices in that area. For the rest of this fiscal year, we decided to hold off those governor's cuts on Health and Human Services, which particularly affected families and families with disabilities. And so we did not want them to be harmed further.
But they were claiming this was the bill, though, that was supposed to reflect the governor's cuts. This was not the bill that was dealt with yesterday, but was dealt with before, that was just straight on the budget cuts. They were saying that one did not reflect the entirety of what the governor wanted to do, or at least in the way he wanted to.
Exactly what the governor wanted, with, I believe, the difference that it was we did not put all of the cuts going forward into law, because I think a new legislature with a new governor would like to maybe make some different decisions.
And then what's the end game on this? It was kind of touched on here, but if we end up in the same situation where we were last year at the end of the session, and we essentially have complete disagreement and the governor not willing to negotiate or talk, right now he's had the unallotment lever taken away from him. There's still the possibility of somebody saying, hey, let's just let it ride and go for shutdown. What do you see as what would happen at if we got to that type of a situation?
Mike, it's it's not quite as simple this year, both because of the lawsuit and the Supreme Court ruling that the governor's actions were illegal. And it also isn't quite the same because we're not at the beginning of a biennium, and it doesn't automatically shut down state government. What does happen here is if we run out of the cash flow money to pay our bills and keep the state running, then we do start to, run into that situation. It's not quite as time certain or clear. It's one of the things that I think everyone else who's been affected by the unallotment lawsuit has been holding off on walking through the door, asking to be paid, hoping that there is some sort of solution here. And, I'm still hopeful that there can be a solution by Monday. That is still the goal here, to make sure that the state is in a stable position. So that's the most important thing. I mean, this is so far beyond one personality or one person's ambitions that it pales by comparison now because of the unallotment lawsuit ruling, that it really does put us into a fiscal peril that we haven't seen before. But the point is, it's always been there since Governor Pawlenty has been the governor in the last couple of years. This is just sort of like taking the curtain back and seeing that the Wizard of Oz is standing behind the curtain, and he's just a regular person that frankly doesn't have a great big plan of how to get us out of this.
So what are the odds that the Wizard of Oz is going to call a special session here? Are you willing to forecast that at all?
Well, if we don't have an agreement, I think the governor will probably have to do that at some point because he cannot manage the fiscal situation on his own. The court has basically curtailed his ability to do that without an agreement.
Madam Speaker, it's Bill Salisbury. Earlier, somebody asked you about what your Plan B is, and you said be willing to listen to Republican ideas, but don't you have your own Plan B?
Well, we obviously put out yesterday, Bill, something that meets the governor more than halfway. We are not opposed to putting a portion of that forward again and combining it with something that would actually pay back the borrowing to school districts. So I think that you saw the elements of Plan B yesterday that was up for a vote that will provide the basis going forward.
Have you been in contact with the governor the last few days, last weekend, and his staff? Have you been discussing possible options?
I have not. I have not heard from them, and I believe that Senator Poggemiller was going to call them yesterday, but I don't know what the result of that call. I did see Senator Poggemiller after the House floor session ended, and he did not indicate whether he had gotten a response from the governor's office yet. We obviously saw the governor's spokesperson's Twitters, so that was about the level of contact we've had right now.
Speaker Kelliher, given that it was pretty clear that Governor Pawlenty was going to veto this bill that passed yesterday, what was the purpose of going forward with a vote given how little time is left in the session?
Is this Steve?
It's Paul Demko, Capitol Report.
Oh, hi, Paul.
Sorry.
I think that just like the vote on Friday, the governor leading up to last Friday's vote on Thursday was very certain that people would vote for his plan, his unallotment plan with the borrowing that didn't pay the schools back. He was most certain of that. And on Friday we learned that everybody's certainty has to be tested. That got far less votes than the plan yesterday got. And so I think it gives us the basis for the elements of what is going to be successful. It's pretty clear that the legislature is willing to vote for deeper cuts. They're willing to vote for a school shift and borrowing that gets paid back, but it does have to have some form of revenue that actually pays it back. I think that's the outline of the successful plan. The question is, does the governor have the courage to sign that plan? Or do we find three Republicans that have some good ideas here that want to have their ideas be part of the bill?
What about any other bills that you've got to deal with, in between dealing with the budget? Have you got any deadline for dealing with those issues, or what's going on with the rest of the session right now?
So who is this? Was this Andrew?
This is Andy from Forum, yes.
Hi, Andy.
Hello.
You know, what's important here is that we're going to get our work done by the end of the week. So all the other outstanding bills that we have out there are going to be negotiated in their conferences and done. And so we have just a couple other big bills that are left out there. The Environment Legacy Bill is out there, and that will be done soon. The Health and Human Services Bill that deals with this portion of the deficit and a number of things, including expansion of health care to more Minnesotans through the tools the federal government gave us. And then I know that Chair Greiling is deeply interested in the education bill, as you've been hearing. So there might be a few other smaller bills. I think we've got the pension bill out there and some things like that. But we are winding our work down, and I think by Thursday we're going to see most of this wrapped up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Again, Doug Rowe. I just wanted to be clear. The big issue in the budget balancing and the overall budget balancing bill, Ms. Speaker, is paying the schools back. Having a formula for paying the schools back. Is that the nut on which everything hangs now?
Doug, you've got it. The deal is here, the governor is borrowing at an unprecedented amount, and every time that we have been putting this forward, we have said, if you want that paid back, and if you want to get to the future that Minnesotans want for their schools, which is a new, renewed school funding formula that's fair, equitable, stable, and has growth into the future, then you have to pay back that borrowing. Right now, and I think, I bet Chair Greiling could tell us how long it will take to pay back potentially pay back that borrowing from school districts. And it's a range of time, but frankly, you're all seeing what the economy is doing. It's going to take quite a while.
And Doug, you will remember former Education Commissioner Gene Mamongay, and I was discussing with him recently how much we owe our schools. It's $2.7 billion with a B dollars, and he practically fell off his chair. You know, that's something that hasn't been covered very much, how much we actually owe our schools, as the governor says he's holding them harmless. But this is unprecedented, and no telling how long it's going to take. Schools are in big trouble. We have this notion that they're held harmless when you listen to Pawlenty, but $2.75 billion with a B is something that people that have been around with schools but haven't followed it closely during his years are shocked. And we should, I just think we can't say that enough.
And that's why having a way to pay that back and make sure that we're on sound fiscal footing going forward is going to be so important. We need to stabilize this budget, but we also need to stabilize and repay the debts that we owe.
I should know this, but what is that in percentage terms? That 2.7 of what goes to the schools? Either of you.
I'll let you do the math out of the $14 billion biennial budget.
Okay, $14 billion of biennial. Okay, thank you. If you let me do the math, by the way, we're all in trouble.
All right. I think that
does anybody have any questions before we wrap up?
Does any of what's happening now, Madam Speaker, does any of this even touch the obligation under law to balance the outline budget?
You know, I think that in terms of the 4-year look, it is, you know, we are struggling to get 2 years balanced here. And so it's going to be very, very difficult to get 4 years balanced when we can't even find people who are willing to do the fiscally responsible thing and balance up 2 years. So that, I think, becomes a real, you know, it almost becomes an issue where we are hoping for the best to get 2 years balanced and then allow the next legislature and governor to deal with the full 4 years.
Can they throw you in jail for violating the law to balance out?
Phyllis Kahn asks this question all the time. Who would they throw in jail? Is it Tom Hansen? Is it the governor? Who is it that is in violation? So, I hope nobody has to go to jail over the budget. I think that there's a way through this, okay?
Okay.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.